Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Lawyer Breakdown, a show with a unique perspective on everything from the mundane to the arcane. My name is Bradford Cady. I'm your host, and I am joined again today by Dr. Joseph Ramos. How are you today?
Nice to be with you again, brother.
Oh, I'm so excited for this one. We're going to start talking about your medical career. I saw the sparkle in your eye when you were talking about medicine over the last couple episodes, and I can't wait to dive into it.
Nice.
But audience, if you have not listened to episodes 1 and 2, we cover Dr. Ramos's family and upbringing as well as some of his initial time in school. And now we want to focus on your medical career and how you got interested in that space of the sciences.
Sweet.
Okay, so we left off with a question at the end of our last episode, and I want to pick it up here. So you asked us what was your least favorite subject to study, and we had organic chemistry, English lit, and the history of nursing. Now, I thought English lit. That was my guess at the end of that last episode, but the audience definitely thinks it's organic chemistry. So tell us.
For my least favorite.
Least favorite.
Drum roll.
Drum roll, yeah. All right.
So it actually was English lit.
Okay.
You were right.
Score one for me.
Yes, here's the deal. So I actually majored in biology, minored in chemistry. I taught a chemistry lab and had my own lab where I was working. It was a lab that was sponsored by IBM in undergraduate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and worked under Professor Gary Fickus, and it was a wonderful experience. So I really love chemistry. It's great. Now, the nursing, the history of nursing was an awesome class.
I believe it.
Because it was full of women. And the history was actually great because it would give you a real perspective about what the field of medicine went through and where it came from and how important and dynamic nurses were in that. And I always appreciated working with nurses.
Yeah, I believe
it. So not only was it cool because there was a lot of pretty girls in the class,
of course.
But it was actually interesting. English lit, the reason it wasn't my favorite was because I love to write and I love to read. So you'd think that would be like the thing.
Yeah, that's why I picked B is I figure, okay, there's got to be something hidden under here. So what is it?
Yeah, so the thing is this. When I realized the very first paper I wrote, I took all this time and turned in this paper and I got a C on it.
Oh.
And I was like, what in the world? And when you're writing for an English professor, there's a lot of subjective. And as you can tell from the biology major, chemistry minor, that's objective, meaning it's right or it's wrong.
Yep.
It's a fact or it's not.
Yep.
In English lit, I had written the first paper I wrote on gun control.
Okay.
Turns out my views on gun control were way different from the professors.
Oh, okay.
Who tore apart my paper and gave me a C.
Some subjective.
So what I realized, if I started writing about topics that the professor liked, or they had some interest in, or they talked about in class, man, I was an A student.
Oh, man.
So I didn't like playing that game. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. That wasn't the reason I was thinking, but it does make sense in the college space. But let's return to that college space because when the last couple things we talked about in episode 2, again, go back and listen to learn a little bit more about Dr. Ramos in episodes 1 and 2. You were in Sacramento and you tried some dentistry, not a fan.
Right.
Then you come to Reno on kind of an awesome surprise of a scholarship.
Yes.
And you get to start at the University of Reno, Nevada. And that's kind of where we left it because you talked a little bit about some surgical. Remind me what that space was about.
Yeah, so I'm in deep at this point by the time I go to Reno because I'd done 2 years of hardcore sciences, thinking I wanted to go to dental school.
Right.
And I get over there, and this is when I realized that was not going to be my future, and I didn't know what to do. But now I've got all these sciences. So what am I going to be, like a science teacher? Something I didn't know. So I had volunteered at Sparks Family Hospital. There was a job over there where you could volunteer in surgery and recovery, and you'd push patients back and forth from before surgery to after surgery. And through doing this, got to know doctors, got to know nurses pretty quick. Some of the doctors were inviting me in on their procedures. Hey, so man, we're doing a hip replacement. You want to come watch it?
No way.
Yeah, it was really cool, and I fell in love with it. And thank God. Now I had made a little extra work for myself because, as it turns out, dentists don't take the same chemistries that the medical doctors do.
Yeah.
So I had to go back and redo a bunch of chemistry. So I got a minor in chemistry actually by accident.
Oh, because you're just doing so many different types of chemistry?
So many of them, yeah. But that set up my path. I knew right then and there, after that experience, I was going to medical school, and my passion started there, and it's never ended.
Was there a procedure you watched or a specific, you saw a doctor do something and you go, man, that was cool. What's one that sticks out in your mind at least?
Well, it was one of the reasons I mentioned, we're doing a hip replacement today because I actually was going to do orthopedic surgery until the very last minute of the match, but that's a whole different story.
Okay.
early on when I went in, I had gone in on some general surgery stuff where they were removing an appendix or doing a hernia repair and stuff. And it was cool and it was fun. But the orthopedic surgery was like being a carpenter. I remember my dad pretty much, and I grew up in a shop.
Yeah.
As a mechanic. And orthopedics is very mechanical. I mean, it's like this brutal sawing. There's no finesse to it. It's just hammering with hammers to pound a hip in and add a little extra glue. And,
gosh.
And I was like, this is how you work on people. This is cool. So
That's wild.
So it was the joint replacement stuff, all the hip stuff, then the pins, or rods in major bones for fractures and stuff. And I really found that to be fascinating.
Wow. Okay, so that's pretty early on in your time at Reno University, or is University of Reno, Nevada.
University of Nevada, Reno.
University of Nevada, Reno. I can't get this right no matter what. Okay, University of Nevada, Reno. This is pretty early on. So like maybe your first or second year, you're in a hip replacement surgery and it's game over. You're an orthopedic surgeon. That's where you're going.
That's exactly right.
So when you get there and you get this scholarship, you're kind of planning ahead to like, okay, I'm going to be here for what, another 4 years?
Well, 2 more at that point because I had finished an associate's degree in science and math in Sacramento before going to Reno. So I had 2 years left.
Okay.
And the science part of my associate's degree was where that led me into that medical pathway. So I had 2 years now. So I had that year, which would have been my 3rd year, to start, kind of getting letters of recommendation, making sure I had the right prerequisites, everything in place to graduate and apply for medical school.
Okay, so then this is help me understand this process. You complete the school, but then you have to apply for medical school after that?
Yes. So what happens is when you're going into your senior year of undergraduate, you start your applications for medical school. And all of those applications are done kind of that last semester of your senior year to see if you're actually going to start the following semester in medical school. And so you have to be prepared going into that senior year of undergraduate for which medical school you want to go to, getting interviews scheduled, all across the country because you never know where you're going to get in. Very competitive. Usually several thousand applicants is not unusual, 5,000 to 7,000 applicants for 100 spots. That school had 52 spots the year I went in with, I'm sure, at least a couple thousand applicants.
Okay. And so you applied to the University of Nevada, Reno?
Yeah, so
medical school?
Yes. So while I was back in Nevada, it was just it was a huge blessing. I was close to my family. I was back near my roots. I had my school being paid for. I'd always worked every minute to try to afford to go to school. So everything kind of started going right there. And I just wanted to stay in Nevada. It was my first choice. Now I applied and had interviews all across the country in different medical schools. I remember being very surprised. You don't have confidence in yourself for one reason or another. And I had applied to, 15 medical schools. In the first 10, I got 10 for 10 interviews.
Wow.
And I was like...
I'm assuming that's not common.
No.
Okay.
And I was like, wow. I can't believe it. So I started canceling interviews or applications of other spots. I just applied at so many because I didn't think I could get in.
Right.
And instantly I started going, wow, this might be a reality.
Okay.
I might actually be a doctor.
Okay, so when you realize that it is a reality, do you have to choose? Like, I'm assuming you got 10 yeses, the 10 interviews at least. So what made, obviously the family being close and Reno, Nevada is close to home and that it makes it a pretty simple choice there. But what did you have to choose from? Was there another school that made it close or was it just not close, staying here?
No, there were several. I actually got accepted into Yale. I got accepted into UC Davis. I got accepted into a whole bunch of them with very prominent names. And pretty much all of them that I had applied to.
Wow.
And I had a really good GPA. I think I had 1B ever. And I had done well on placement scores and those kind of things. And so I got all these acceptances. And it was a real struggle because I didn't know if I wanted to get this name prestige thing or if I wanted to be happy. And it was probably the first time in my life, and it was following that Air Force Academy experience that we talked about before,
right,
that I really realized what happiness was and how important that was. And you can't put a scale on that.
Yeah.
And that was being by my family and being where I was from and being come from that environment. And so I didn't chase the prestige thing with several of the acceptances I had. And I, pursued the happiness part. And I've never stopped on that.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, and I think that when you have an experience like you had at the Air Force Academy, it does kind of clarify that choice a little bit. It's like home is a great place to be.
Yes, new perspective. And there's always these hidden blessings that you never anticipate with things. So one thing that we didn't talk about much earlier was my senior year of high school in that little country town of Austin, Nevada. I met this girl.
Oh, here's okay. Let's get started.
Yes, I met Paige, my wife, and man, I was just Twitter-pated over her. She was so special, and we had worked together at this gold mine. When I was a senior in high school, I was working.
Okay.
And I was working in a gold mine, and I had gotten to work in field maintenance where you go out and work on equipment because my dad had taught me a lot of mechanical stuff. And so only 2 students got selected to work on equipment. And to make a long story short, me and this other guy, we had a service truck. We'd run out in the field and work on broken down diesels, and we would figure out what they needed. One of us would run back to the parts house and get the parts. Well, my wife was the parts girl in the parts house.
So you were the one that was always running back to go buy and pick up the parts.
And I was like, wow, I like this girl. So we dated that summer, but then we were torn away because she went to the University of Nevada, Reno to college. I went to the Air Force Academy.
Yeah.
End of a little summer thing.
Yeah.
Now her town was 118 miles from mine growing up, so I didn't get to know her in high school. I always thought she had such a big high school. She had 32 people in her high school class.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So anyway, when I went back to Reno too, I was almost going to be maybe a chance to kind of get reunited with this my dream.
Because you've been in Sacramento after,
Yes.
so it's been a
2 years,
couple years. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I go to Reno, as fate would have it, she transfers to Vegas because she went into advertising and promotions, and Vegas had a tremendous journalism school, University of Nevada, Las Vegas. So she moves. She goes to Vegas, and I'm in Reno. So it was interesting, though, because it got me back in the state of Nevada, and it got me near my wife. And as you'll hear when we go into the residency part, when I moved to Vegas, we got reconnected.
Oh, okay. Well, so talk to me. I don't really understand how the residency program works, but I think that's another next step here.
Yes.
So you get accepted. You're at the University of Nevada, Reno Medical School. You get started. You're expecting to be there for a couple of years.
Yep.
But talk to me about how residency works in that time frame, and then how you get reconnected with Paige.
So in medical school, they do 2 years of the book work of medical school in Reno.
Okay.
For the clinical years, because there's so much more clinical activity in Vegas, bigger city.
Oh, right.
You move there for
right.
the clinical years. Well, so my second year of medical school, I moved to Las Vegas. And of course, that's where I reconnected with Paige. But the interesting part so that was medical school still, my 2 years in Vegas. And I get reconnected with my wife.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my wife today.
Yeah.
But I had to apply to residency. And I was going to be an orthopedic surgeon.
Yeah.
And I think the night before we had to finalize our picks for the match, what you do is when you go through medical school, at the end, you get all these letters of recommendations. You go for different specialties, radiology, orthopedic surgery, whatever you want to do, internal medicine, emergency medicine. You try to get letters from the people that are in the field you want to work in. You want to get honors in your classes in the field you want to work in.
Okay.
Well, I had done all that to set up orthopedics perfectly.
Yeah.
Night before the match, I called my mom and I'm like, I don't think I can do this. She's like, what? Like,
Yeah.
doctor? Like what? Because my mom was my confidant.
Yeah.
Confidant. Anyway, I said, no, I love medicine, Mom. I just don't think I can do orthopedic surgery. She said, why? I said, these guys enjoy being in the operating room more than they enjoy their family, which is true. They get so excited to go do like a hip or a knee. I loved it. I loved doing that.
Yeah.
But I didn't love it more than my family. If I had a chance to be in the mountains fishing or be with my family at a barbecue, I'd choose that all day, every day.
And that's just not what you saw from those orthopedic surgeons?
I saw this love of the profession more than the love of anything else. The only guys I'd ever seen who had outside interests, who pursued them, and they were multifaceted. They were the guys that sold art on the side, but they did something else. They played a guitar and they did this, or they fished the pro bass circuit, but they also did that. The only people who did that were emergency medicine physicians. Because when you're on, you're on. And when you're off, you're off.
Okay.
And the night before the match, I changed to emergency medicine.
The night before?
Yeah. So that was a little bit freaky. And so I ended up then, through that process, you do a transitional year. You have to do a residency year first and become licensed as an MD.
Okay.
Like a lot of people do their internship and then they go off and practice.
Okay, got it.
That used to be the standard. But so I did that year in Vegas. And the process had been accepted to the emergency medicine program here in Denver, Colorado. This is a program that everybody wants to come to here because the people who wrote the books, the leading treatises in the profession, teach here at Denver Health Medical Center.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so you You make a switch the night before.
Yep.
You do a year in Las Vegas, reconnect with Paige, and then inside that year, is that when you'd find out you get accepted to go to Denver? Or do you find that out at the beginning of that year and know, hey, when I'm finished with this year in Vegas, I'm going to be able to go up to Denver?
Oh, great question, man. It's that one.
Okay.
I knew when I got accepted and had to do the transitional year in Vegas that I was already accepted in Denver the following year. So my next 4 years of training were lined out.
Locked up.
Already knew where I was going, what I was doing, what I was getting paid, what my eventual profession would be, whole 9 yards. And now I'm in Vegas, reconnected with this girl I was in love with, that I met in high school that just held that spot in my heart. And my year in Vegas ended and I had to come to Denver and it was decision time.
Okay, so what's the decision you have to make in Denver here?
Do I move without Paige to Denver? Probably been seeing her in Vegas the whole time.
Okay.
Or do I ask her to come along?
Talk to me about that, because that's got to be wild. Like reconnecting with a high school love interest, and this gal you used to see at the counter who'd hand you parts across the table, and now you've got this crazy opportunity. Like, I mean, how long were you cooking that question before you asked her to come with you?
I have to tell you, I get a little emotional even thinking about it, because to me, that was such a huge decision. I just was really starting this exciting part of my career. But I was really excited about her. And, but that's a big move to ask me if they want to move with you. But I did. I said, because we kind of could both sense, like this is coming down like the month before I said anything.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, do you want to go with me? She's like, what? I said, well, do you want to move to Denver? She's like, I would love to. So we weren't married.
Almost like, why did I wait to ask her for so long?
So we weren't married. She moved here with me without a job. We loaded up a U-Haul and a truck that was breaking down that had no window in it, that we had plastic in the window. And we moved to Denver, Colorado. We stayed in a Super 8 motel while we looked for a place to live.
There you go.
We could only afford a place. At that point, the Highlands was the poor area of town. It was where anything was affordable. It was a rough neighborhood. I mean, our neighbor 2 houses down got killed. But we moved to Denver, Colorado together and moved to where we could afford, and away we went. She went and found a job, and I started working every day.
Wow. Okay, so we're starting to establish ourselves in Denver now, right? So this is now your first year of residency?
Yep.
Okay, so talk to me a little bit about getting to Denver, enjoying Denver. You talk a little bit about how you landed here with Paige, but give me a little more.
So it was a great experience because, well, number one, when you come to Denver Health Medical Center for residency, you're among the best of the best. You feel challenged every day. And
well, you were saying this is kind of where they write the books on this kind of stuff. So you're working with these people at this time.
Yeah, I think when I applied here, there was like 3,000 applications for 9 spots or 11 spots. Wow. I mean, it's really highly sought after. But when you come here, it's special because, for example, like doing thoracotomies, opening up people's chests, like if they get shot through the chest and you do a thoracotomy. In most programs, you wouldn't do that until your senior year. Here, they do so many at Denver Health Medical Center that your first year and you're doing them.
Wow.
And so you do a lot of procedures, you see a lot of sick people, you have a tremendous training experience, and you're around these people who know so much that you respect every single day, and they're teaching you so much, and I love to learn.
So
that was awesome.
What year is it, the first year you're in Denver?
So, well, I finished up in 2001, so that would have been 98 because I did the year there and then 3 here. Okay. So that would have been 98, and those 3 years flew by.
I believe it. I mean, if you're going to get in and it's high speed, maximum velocity day one, I mean, the time has to go quick.
Yes.
What are some of the experience you had in those first couple years in the Denver Health Medical Center's residency? What's a couple things that really stick out? Give me a few more things that stick out.
Yeah. So I'll give you a couple personal and a couple professional. On a personal level, I'll do professional first.
Okay.
On professional level, the things that stuck out to me were how high the expectations were. You rise to the level of expectations of those around you and what they're doing. And I grew so much as a physician, and I matured so much in that way that professionally, that was probably something that just sticks out to me. It was like every day, certain mistakes I made throughout the way still stick out to me. I still remember the cases where I made mistakes because you learn so much every day. So professionally, it was like on warp speed. Personally, it was incredible because I'm now with my wife to this day. I've now been with 26 years, and we started trying to have babies. So after a year, well, she moved here with me. about 6 months later, I asked her if she would marry me. After her parents both approved, which was awesome. And her mom came here for Christmas, and I asked her at Christmas to marry me, and her mom was there. A special time I'll never forget. And because at this point we're later in our lives, I'm going to say later now looking back, it was early, but so we were probably already 26, 27 years old. And we knew that the biological clock was ticking on the ovaries for babies, right? So we started trying and we couldn't have babies. My wife was monitoring her temperatures. We were trying to cycle things. I'm wearing boxers all the time, doing everything you read about and do, taking all the right supplements, doing everything. And we couldn't have babies. And I'm the oldest of 8, as I told you. Now my wife's an only, but she's got some stepbrothers and sisters, and she always loved our family and coming to my family because of the big family. And so we wanted to have kids really bad. And so one of the other things that sticks out about me through that residency was my final year of residency. You get to go away and you can go anywhere, and they give you it's almost like a 6-week period or an 8-week period where you can go learn medicine anywhere. You can go to another country, another state, another program. You can go do anything. It's hey.
Kind of anywhere in the world, just go learn something in the medicine field.
Yeah,
wow,
so
that's awesome.
It's called an elective. They finally give you an elective your last year. I went to Costa Rica and left Paige here. Went there to do this 2 months worth of medicine. And every day was really incredible, learning their system, learning what they do. See, there's only one CT scanner in the country at that point when I was there.
Wow.
How much better our training is here than it was there. Really, it was just striking. I learned so much. Anyway, while I was there, I really freed up my mind. I was running over this mountain every day to run to the hospital. I'd run about 3.5 miles to the hospital and run back, and these monkeys would howl at me out of these trees, and I stopped looking up. There's this one really beautiful tree, and I remember just being just this peace. So Paige came there for the last 2 weeks, and that's where we conceived our first child.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I haven't been able to touch her since then without getting her pregnant. the other one just flowed like that. The first one was a challenge, man, but the next 2 came with single touches.
Wow.
So it was amazing. So of course we now have 2 boys and a girl, 24, 22, and 20.
That's awesome.
And so that's the other thing about those years that really sticks out to me. And it took me to the end of my residency and then my start of my medical career, where I fortunately got hired at, when I was getting ready to graduate, they asked me if I wanted to stand as an attending. That's a teacher teaching the residents that came in like I did.
Wow.
So I got to teach with the very people who taught me. I was now one of their colleagues.
That's
that
incredible.
was an honor.
Yeah.
So I stayed on for 10 years at the University Hospital, which is associated with Denver Health. You do a shift a month over there and the rest at university. Teaching as a professor for 10 years actively on clinical cases. So I was teaching people how to do their first thoracotomy. Or I was teaching people how to do a central line.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot there in 10 years. So, right, they have this incredible reconnection and then an opportunity to begin a family. And that's all happening inside of 4 years. There's a move to Denver in there, residency. But then as soon as you're done with residency, you get started on this teaching program for the other future residents. And you get to do that for 10 years.
Did it for 10 years. Yeah, teaching people that were just like me, coming here, dreaming about getting in here, and then starting their dream, and now they have to learn.
Wow.
And you have to get them up to speed.
Wow.
So that was cool.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So, obviously, we've not spoken a lick about the law at this point. It sounds like you're still pretty starstruck with the medical community.
Yeah.
Now, we're not going to be able to go through every single one of those 10 years. But I know that there's an interest in law that shows up at some point. So what is it that kind of sparks this idea of man, I got to start, what is this legal, what gets you interested there?
So just in a nutshell, while I was at the University Hospital, I started doing a bunch of expert work as a doctor, testifying in cases, giving expert opinions on what had happened medically. That's a big thing in law.
Right.
And over the course of doing that, I began to realize that some people I didn't feel like were getting represented well because the attorneys didn't understand the medicine. You're talking about a medical issue, but you're an attorney. You really need to understand what you're talking about. And I would go to trial as an expert in some of these things and would be frustrated with how the attorneys question, you're not getting it out, because you don't understand it. And one day, I told my wife when I went home, she'd ask me, hey, how'd it go today, honey? And I said, no, not that good. She said, why? I said, I just feel like the person's story didn't get told. I feel really bad for the person. And she said, why is that? And I said, well, we got on, the attorney asked about 5 questions. I felt like we were out in deep water and he couldn't swim, and it ended. And she said, oh, that sucks. And I said, yeah, they're lucky I'm not an attorney. Because if I was, they could run, but they couldn't hide. And she said, oh, that'd be cool. And I went and Googled
Oh,
Or
no.
looked up how do you become an attorney?
Oh, no.
And found out that there was this test called the LSAT. And I guess
Okay,
we'll
that
pick
right
up
there.
next time. Huh?
Yeah, I think that's perfect, right? Because you've already had her move. We've got 3 kids. You're doing probably a heavy career at the university hospital. And now you want to add more school?
Yes.
Well, let's sign off here for now. Let's pick that up because I think the legal stuff is going to be a great next episode. But as we've been doing for a sign-off question, I asked you to come prepared. Give us 3 choices of a medical procedure or like a ER trauma response in the emergency room, emergency department, that sounds complex but is actually simple. And then I'll give my guess, and then we'll see what the audience has to say.
Okay, 3 choices, something that sounds complex, it's actually simple. Okay, choice number 1 is a fracture dislocation in a leg. So that's when you've broken the bones and dislocated the joint, and you have to relocate it so they get proper blood flow, and then obviously they're either going to go to surgery to fix it or heal that way.
Okay.
So fracture dislocation, relocation, so to say. Choice number 2 would be a central line. A central line is when you put a line in someone's chest to go to their major vessels. You can run a line and run it to their aorta that goes down to their heart to give them medications through it, or a lot of things through that. That's another frequent procedure that's done. And let's talk about thoracotomy. We'll put that as 3rd on the list. Thoracotomy is where you cut into somebody's chest and open it up, sometimes to cross-clamp the aorta and stop bleeding if there's abdominal or lower extremity bleeding. Sometimes just stop it. You have to find the biggest vessel above it and cross-clamp it.
Okay.
So fracture, dislocation, relocated, central line, big line into the chest that runs to the heart, or thoracotomy, opening up the chest and doing what you need to do to stop them from bleeding.
Well, they all sound incredibly complex. I'm going to go with B, though, with a central line, because if you have to string something from like someone's chest all the way through to their aorta, I could imagine that it's like, oh yeah, you just follow the vessels, but it's got to be tougher than that. So I'm going to go with B for this answer. But audience, if you've got an answer to one of those questions, leave it in the comments. We'll ask you, Dr. Joe, when we get back to the next episode. But that's it for today's episode of the Dr. Lawyer Breakdown, and we'll see you on the next one.